Hi, this is Janice Drew, Director of Marketing and President of Inc. Y. I'd like to thank you for joining our webinar today on addressing your top marketing challenges, growing your team, and getting things done. As a marketing executive and entrepreneur, I found that some of my top challenges center around finding the right people to work with and making sure they have the skills to get things done. And it's not just about getting things done, it's about getting the right things done that generate positive results for your business or organization. I'm thrilled to launch this webinar series to help other marketers, executives, business professionals, and entrepreneurs hone in on what really matters in marketing. Our featured panelists today are Chris Cianci and Jeff Kosharek. You can find each of our bios in the link on the left-hand side of your screen, along with other resources to go with this webinar. Also, the Q&A box is at the bottom of your screen, directly below the slides for you to enter any questions, and we'll plan to answer them toward the end of the presentation. Jeff is the Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for Advanced Technology Services, a global leader in factory, maintenance, industrial parts, and IT managed services. He's responsible for architecting all marketing strategies and activities for ATS and serves as a strategic advisor to the business in developing and implementing marketing programs aimed at business growth. Jeff developed and manages the 4 pillars of the marketing program that consists of business intelligence, product management, marketing communications, and demand generation. Chris is the founder and managing partner of TribalVision, an outsourced marketing department for hire with offices in Boston and Providence. Chris is also the author of 2 books, Market Smarter and Marketing in the Trenches, which is available for download as a free resource to attendees of this webinar. Chris, I'd like to start by asking you about the growth of your company, TribalVision. What is one thing that has helped you grow your team and get things done as a business owner?
Thanks, Janice. Great question. I think I have 2 answers to that. One would be, in just a quick backdrop, we've grown TribalVision. It's about 7 years old, from just myself to about 50 employees at this point, between full-time and part-time employees. And I think the reason for that type of growth, and it was all done organically just through hard work with client by client, is really 2 things. One is engagement. I know that I could have the greatest marketing strategy and tactics in the world, but if I'm not surrounding myself with engaged, smart people who are passionate like I am about trying to grow businesses, it would be a losing strategy for me. So I would say short answer is engaged, passionate teammates, and making sure there's process in place to keep them engaged and to make sure that they remain with TribalVision, hopefully for many years. The second part of that answer is, of course, I'm going to get into this in a bit, is really, I felt like we really came up with a wonderful marketing strategy for TribalVision. We put a lot of time into it in the early stages of founding the company, and it's really served us greatly. So I would say those would be my 2 short answers.
That's great, Chris. Now, I know in your presentation you have a number of useful strategies and tactics for marketers and entrepreneurs who are looking to get things done. Let me hand you the control of the presentation now.
Thanks, Janice. Appreciate it. So, yeah, if we then, the slide that we have now in front of us, I just thought to really start this, at least my portion of this webinar, talking about how broken marketing has been in the past. So it's an interesting, I think, take. But I think it's important because oftentimes business owners of both large, mid, and small companies, when I first introduce myself to them, they say, oftentimes they say, well, marketing really isn't working for me. I'm not seeing results. And they're right. And of course they're right, because they're the ones running the business to see what's working and what's not. And there are just some statistics I thought to put on this page that really are pretty striking. And this is, if we're talking about right now, traditional marketing. So I'm defining traditional marketing as television, print, and radio. And as you can see, I'm not going to talk about every stat, of course, that you can see here, but 18% of television advertising campaigns generate a positive return, just 18%. And that's actually going down as we speak. 54 cents is the average return in sales of every dollar spent on what's called outbound marketing, which again is a type of marketing that's dated, where it's about cold calling and interrupting people and consumers and businesses with a message versus pulling them in. And again, you can read the other stats on this slide as well. The point is, traditional marketing has been broken, and the good news, at least, is with the rise of digital and the rise of social media and the rise of a proliferation of channels that are now out there, other than those 3 or 4 that I just mentioned that are outbound facing, is a real opportunity now for business owners and marketing heads to really start generating a positive ROI, which even just 6 or 7 years ago was going to be a little bit more difficult to do. Given that backdrop, the question then becomes, of course, okay, well, Chris, you just mentioned that there are, instead of 3 or 4 different channels to reach an audience, there's now, and I'm not exaggerating when I say there's hundreds of channels, what should we do? And again, of course, there's 2 paths, as you can see with this slide. One is maintaining the status quo, and the other is actually developing a strategic marketing plan. And while everyone knows that it's important to have a marketing plan, and many feel like they do have a marketing plan, once we start asking more and more questions with at least the business owners and marketing teams that we interact with every day, it becomes apparent that oftentimes there's somewhat of a marketing strategy, but it's maybe on a piece of paper, maybe it's 5 slides, maybe it's a combination of 4 different departments putting bullets down for 2017, but there really isn't a clearly defined strategy in place. And that's really where I feel, based on my years of experience, where most of the results start to break down. It's right in that foundational stage of what we're putting together. So with that being said, I just thought it was important then to share with the audience at least our methodology for putting together a really tight, practical, results-driven marketing strategy and what that consists of. Because I think if we asked everyone on this call today, okay, how would you define a marketing strategy and what does it look like, we're probably all going to have a little bit of a different answer. Many would talk about SWOT analyses, and others would be talking in another language as well. So we've somewhat standardized what a marketing strategy should look like over the 7-8 years that we've done this for our clients. And I just want to share very briefly these 6 steps with the audience as to really what we feel is a results-driven strategy should consist of. So I'll give a high-level overview with these 6 right now, and then from there we'll dive in a little bit more to each of them. First is research. We'll get into that, of course. Of course, you need to have market research before you really can start figuring out any type of strategy. That then leads to what we call messaging and positioning of a marketing strategy, which then leads to figuring out which tactics and channels that you should be using to actually drive awareness of your product, service, company. From there, there's an asset development phase to the strategy that you need to be thinking about once you have the tactics in line, which then leads to a metrics dashboard, because oftentimes, again, when we look at strategies that are out there, we, of course, then say, okay, well, what is the objective and what are the metrics that we're going towards? And oftentimes, business owners, marketing teams, companies, they really don't have a solid metrics dashboard to measure the results of the strategy and to then, of course, react and improve the strategy. And then lastly, and actually most importantly, which we'll get into in just a moment, it's a tactical implementation, because the rest of the strategy means nothing if we're not actually implementing that strategy in a really efficient, results-oriented way. So those are really the 6 sections of what we feel a comprehensive marketing strategy should consist of. And then dig in a little bit, and we look at that first pillar then about research. You just have to make sure, and again, you might say, well, this is common sense. Of course, we need to know a little bit about our marketplace before we put a strategy together, and we've been doing this for 50 years. We're a 50-year-old company, so we know our market. But then once you start asking questions of both internal employees and teammates, and then doing external research of the marketplace, you then oftentimes realize that what you thought you were and what you thought the marketplace looked like really is not really what it is. So I guess my point is with this slide, just make sure that you're engaging with the internal team and not just coming up with your own market research in your bubble or in your vacuum. You've got to, for us at least at TribalVision, we're talking to 8, 10, 15 people in a company oftentimes, all with different skill sets and slices of the business, to really understand who their customer is, who they are, what their internal strengths and capabilities are as a company, and where they see the company going in the upcoming years. Now, oftentimes there's very different points of view, and And there's really no consistency oftentimes. And of course, you then have to do strategic market research, whether that's through paid channels and offerings, whether it's a Forrester research report or other paid research reports that you can do of the marketplace, or it can just be really rigorous market research through the internet, which oftentimes we're doing for companies who are very tight on a budget. They can't spend $10,000 for a research report. But it's important that we're taking these steps and, of course, looking at your competition in a very quantitative way. We've got to be doing these types of things before we even think about what tactic we should be using. And what pitfall we find oftentimes is a marketing head or a business owner, and more often than not a business owner, to be frank, because they're not marketers. They want to skip right to the fun stuff, as they say, right? They want to skip to the tactics. What channels are we using? What are we using on social media? But they've really not fully understood who their customer is, who they are, and how they can be better servicing a customer that's out there. So that market research I can't stress enough as being the foundation of a solid strategy. Once you've done that research properly, you should then be able to define what your message and position is for each of the audiences that you now realize you might be selling into. And it's very important. So I'm just using MJSA, that's a nonprofit that we've worked with in the past, using them as an example. But if you notice, we're trying to position them with very distinct pillars of who they are now that we've done the research. So access to expertise, network of suppliers, advocacy, and industry support. Those are the three pillars behind MJSA that we then, with them, of course, came to that conclusion. Without that research, we wouldn't have been able to really know what their true message is to each of their audiences. Because, again, you can look at your own company, and I'll look at mine even, TribalVision. There are many audiences that I'm trying to speak to, right? There's the Fortune 500 company where I'm not going to be their marketing department. I'm just going to take a sliver of their marketing and be that expert, whereas there's a small manufacturer out there where we will be their department. Very different messages in very subtle ways sometimes to those distinct audiences. So just like think about it, your own business, your own organization, how many different audiences do you really have that's out there? And from there, what are their pain points, and how can you then make sure that you're positioned in a way where you're solving those pain points? So very important that once the research is done, you can message properly, you can position yourself properly based on those segments and audiences that found. And again, this is just another example. You can segment your message by market or audience, right? It's a very different message if you're messaging to a distributor, for example, to an OEM, to a retailer, to a consumer. So just don't think one message fits all and one position fits all. Oftentimes it's much more complex than that, and you need to be thinking about multiple messages to multiple audiences to be as personalized as you can in this marketing strategy. From there, this is where oftentimes, like I said, the fun can really begin, because then you can take a hard look now that you have the research done and you now know what your message is and who your audience is with that message. How are you then going to be, going after those audiences? And so I've put together a funnel here of all of the different avenues that you can actually be considering, of course, bringing your product or offering to market, right? You know a lot of these buzzwords, I'm sure: Google AdWords, SEO, email, social media, events, direct mail, traditional media, online display, content marketing. I can probably think of 50 more. But the point is, we now, for our clients, and what you should be doing for yourselves, is taking a hard look at, now that you know your message and you know your audiences, what channels are optimal to actually then be engaging with those audiences. And it doesn't stop there, so just know that while everyone thinks, okay, these are the tactics in that upper band of this pillar or this funnel, there's also other ways, of course, that you can be growing. It doesn't just have to be through traditional marketing channels. It can also be through, for example, exploring strategic partnerships to achieve both online and global results. And also, if you're a global play in any way, I mean, for a lot of our clients, we're taking a hard look at Amazon relationships, eBay relationships, Alibaba relationships, right? We've got to remember the ultimate objective here is growth. And it's not just about your standard marketing tactics. Oftentimes you have to really think hard about other partnerships and other channels that you can be leveraging for you to bring your company to that next level. So the point of this slide is make sure that you're looking and being very thorough with all of the different avenues that you can be bringing awareness to your company. And it's a funnel, by the way, just because you've got to make sure you need to be starting with, let's say it's 50 channels and tactics that are out there. You've got to now start figuring out, based on who your audience is and where they're digesting information to learn about their solutions to their pain points. You have to narrow that down, of course, from 50 to 5, right, to 3, right, to make sure that you are prioritizing your time on the right tactics and the right channels, because you could be brilliant and you could really think through different channels and go after it, but if they're the wrong channels, you've just wasted a lot of time and effort. So you've got to take a hard look at, figuring out what channels are optimal. This slide here just talks to, again, making sure that you have specific goals now for the tactics that you've selected. So, for example, for website optimization, well, are you looking for higher web traffic? Are you looking for more relevant web traffic? Are you just looking for, to increase your unique visitors, or are you looking to increase their time on your site with engagement? You've got to be putting metrics, and we'll talk about this in a moment, but you've got to be putting metrics behind each of these tactics that you've selected so that you know really where you're going with the tactics versus just trying a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And that's what we find with a lot of companies, is that's why they engage with us, because they've tried a little bit of everything and nothing's worked, because they haven't been rigorous about what we're going through right now. Once that's done, you then can lead to somewhat this fourth step, or this fourth pillar of a strategy, this fourth section of a strategy, which is what now assets, what bait do you need to then be attracting that fish in the pond, right? And oftentimes what happens is, again, the old way of putting a plan together is, okay, what assets do we need? Well, we can't even think about what assets we need until we know what channels we're going to be using, right? Because if our channel, let's just say our website is the channel that we're going to be driving our growth from, just the website, then we really need to make sure that that website has the correct assets of video, it has the right assets of technology behind that platform, there's integration into Salesforce, right? It's a whole other asset build out for that channel versus if you said, okay, you know what, we're really going to have more of an offline opportunity with our Salesforce where they're going to be getting in front of 100 customers. Well, if that's the case, then the assets are going to be sales pitch decks, and it's going to be more offline assets that are needed. So my point on this slide is make sure you don't think about assets in building out assets that are so important until you figure out what the channels are. All right, I'll use one more very quick example. So if you're saying paid search is the way that we're going to be building our business for the next year, well, what assets do you need? Well, you sure as heck need a really great ad copy for the AdWords campaign. You need a landing page to drive someone to. That's an asset that oftentimes companies don't have. You need a contact form that really is going to be scientifically selling and capturing information. And you need a drip email marketing campaign for those who decide not to buy after they've filled out your form. Those are all assets in a chain that we have to be thinking about if we're using that channel. So so again, big picture point, figure out tactic with that strategy, and then from there figure out what channels are married to that tactic. This is just a little bit of eye candy, again, just to show, again, some visual to what needs to be married to what channel, for example. So this is a video in the lower right-hand corner, for example, with someone driving someone to a website. This is a postcard where for a furniture company, again, we're making sure that we're driving business in their doors through direct mail postcards at certain times of the year, et cetera. Once that's all done, again, the fifth pillar of that marketing strategy is, again, as I had mentioned early on, developing now the key metrics to track your progress. And so you need to be KPIs, stand for key performance indicators, and you need to be thinking through what are the 8, 10, 12, I wouldn't go 20, I think that's analysis paralysis if you're just starting out. I think you need 8 to 12 key performance indicators that you're now going to hold your marketing team to, or if you are the marketing team, you're going to hold yourself to say, okay, this is how we're going to gauge the success or failure of this strategy. So it might be number of marketing-generated leads. It could be the number of in-person new business visits. Right? It could be the number of leads that actually have closed. What is that lead-to-close ratio? I mean, there's many that we can use, but I would always argue you want to tie it to direct revenue as much as you can. I oftentimes see business owners and entrepreneurs, tracking, okay, what is my click-through rate? What is my open rate of my emails? Well, that's great, but I want to get to the end of the funnel. Has that generated business for you? That, of course, is most important. So make sure you're thinking through what those proper KPIs should be. Lastly, sixth and final section that we think of a very buttoned-up plan, comprehensive plan should consist of, is then creating a really detailed implementation plan, right? Because we want to make sure that all of this hard work that we've put in place of these other 5 steps doesn't go to waste. And I'll just end with this. We have a few more slides that I'll breeze through a little bit, but I just want to be clear that the strategy means nothing if at the end there isn't a very detailed implementation plan. As you can see with my slide here, we use a software called Smartsheet. So it's a little tip for you if you want to take a look in Google Smartsheet. There's a free version and a paid version, but this is where per marketing campaign and tactic that we've recommended thus far in our plan, these are the subtasks to carry that out. These are the dates, as you can see here on the right. And this is who is responsible for what, for example, color-coded to actually carry this out. It's what I call the final mile, and that final mile is everything, because if it's not carried through properly, the greatest strategy in the world will go nowhere if it stays in a drawer or if it's implemented in a very poor fashion. So for those out there that say, Chris, this sounds great, but you know what? I'm a one-person team. I don't have time to do all that market research or the budget to do it. It's just me out here. I would at least then just recommend go then right to this tactical implementation chart, if worst case scenario, and start putting down what you feel are the prioritized campaigns and make sure there are deadlines to that with subtasks that you can hold yourself accountable to. And make sure that you're not trying to bite off 10 different tactics at once. You want to be biting off 1, 2, 3 at a time, go deep with them, and then move on to the next. This is interesting. I just thought I'd throw this marketing calendar in there for those companies that are large enough. What I found is oftentimes the strategy just ends up just within the leadership team's purview, and it doesn't actually disseminate down to the rest of the company. This marketing calendar or growth calendar is really powerful in a very simple way where, for example, for manufacturers that are out there, we've built these calendars so that they can put them up on the assembly floor, for example. They can be putting them up in a lot of different departments throughout the company so they know color-coded wise, exactly what's going on from a marketing perspective in that upcoming month and that upcoming quarter. So everyone feels like they know what's going on with the growth of the company. They know the marketing efforts involved that stems from that strategy, and they even know what their role is potentially in making sure that's carried through properly. I just end this, and again, I'm going to go a little bit faster now because I know that I'm running out of time here, but I just wanted to give a little bit of dabble here into making sure that you're thinking through what those tactics are. I know that I mentioned to you before about there's probably 100 tactics. Tried to break this down to sort of the key tactics that we feel that are out there that are working right now. So it's your website, of course. It's third-party website advertising, search engine marketing, another word for paid search, and also SEO, for example. That's organic search, email marketing, online marketplaces, social media, and then, of course, tracking, which brings it all together. So there's many more buckets, but what's out there right now, what we're leveraging oftentimes for our clients, centers around sort of these horsemen that are out there, right? So you call it like the 4 horsemen. There's more than 4, but we feel like these are probably 80% of where you're going to be going. Quick tips, just to make sure, if we are just talking website right now, please make sure that you're really focused on making sure that it's a foundational asset for you. Oftentimes we work with business owners where they're obsessed with what their actual headquarters looks like, but their actual online storefront is lacking, right, their website. So I'm just putting red arrows here to show whatever your tactics are, they're going to be leading to your website. So please make sure that that website can really sing, right? Can really make sure that it's producing the conversion that you're looking for with all of your marketing channels. Second quick tip of that website, just make sure if you take a look at this is your mobile phone, for example, all different sizes of tablets. No matter what, lowest hanging fruit for you out there right now, if your website is not being shown properly and loaded properly onto a mobile phone or a tablet, not only are you being penalized by Google, which you are, but your consumers are going to just go right on to the next company because they're expecting a really clean experience. And many times companies don't have what's called a responsively designed and coded website that's out there. So please be sure, if nothing else, of everything I've said, a practical tip, make sure that website is coded for any device that's out there. I thought for this slide, I just wanted to give a little nugget that there's now technology and tools out there, for example, for your website, where a company like LeadLander can be leveraged so that you can collect more specific intelligence on your site visitors. So we're leveraging this for a lot of our clients right now, where if someone, for example, lands on TribalVision's website and fills out a form, we're going to be able to capture with a reverse IP lookup who that individual is, at least what the company is, and a large percentage of the time who the individual of the company is. And even if they don't fill out a lead form, about 50% of the time now with the technology that's out there, you're going to be able to capture who it is that's actually visited your site, which is like gold, right, to your sales force or to you as the business owner to then say, my goodness, this week these 50 companies or individuals came to my site. I want to then be thinking about a process to outreach to these companies without feeling like Big Brother that's out there. Last two little points I have, make sure that if you are using email, what we see out there right now is you really have to not just batch and blast your email campaigns that are out there. You want to make sure that you have a series of automated emails. They're called drip campaigns, that when someone does actually come to your website, they're getting, not just one message from you, but over the course of, let's say, 6 months, a series of 5, 6, 7 emails that can be communicating with them in ways where they stay engaged with your brand. Very important. So this is just live that just is an example of a drip email marketing campaign, right, where ultimately you have first touch point, an email goes out 2 hours after their action on your website. From there, 2 days after the open, there's another touch point that happens, and then there's, of course, 3 days after that, there's another touch point. That all can be automated with technology today. So again, another practical nugget from hopefully this webinar is if you have your website already buttoned up, you want to be then looking at automated marketing technology, whether that is HubSpot, if you're familiar with HubSpot, whether that's even iProspect, where they've come up with a marketing automation platform for like $75 a month, $100 a month, that will allow you to automate this drip campaign that I'm talking about. Other quick marketing tools that we found are very powerful for our clients right now. If you've heard of Marketo, is very similar to HubSpot, a little bit more high-end. It's a very powerful marketing automation platform. Acton is another, and I've already mentioned iContact and even MailChimp now, right? MailChimp is, they're free up to however many thousands of emails. They're now getting into the game of marketing automation now as well. So if nothing else, I would just recommend before you go with the Cadillacs of the HubSpots and the Eloquas of the world, and even the Marketos of the world, there are lower-end marketing automation tools that are out there right now that can really help bring your business to that next level of awareness with the tactic. So there's a lot I just got in. I just thought I'd want to try and give as much sort of practical advice as possible with my section. At this point, I'd like to hand it off then to Jeff. And Jeff, I am now going to cede control of my mouse to you.
Sounds good, Chris. Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Yes. Hear you just fine, Jeff.
Fantastic. Well, thanks, Chris. Great slides and certainly a lot of food for thought there. If nothing else, you see that marketing is multifaceted here, and to pick up on one of Chris's points, the old ways of marketing just aren't working anymore. And it's the adage of it's not your grandfather's marketing anymore. You talk about inbound marketing versus outbound marketing, the new technologies that are available to us. It's a brave new world out there. So in keeping with our theme here, growing your team and getting things done, I'm going to talk to three subjects here: setting the foundation for growth, prioritizing programs and initiatives, and then partnering for value add. And really my goal here is to set you apart, the folks that are listening to this webinar, to set you apart from colleagues you might work with, and to set you apart from other people who might have previously held marketing jobs there. Give you that leg up on both the strategy and the tactics of moving your program forward. So with that, I'm going to start off, you mentioned pillars before. And one of the first steps I always tell people is, in order to set this foundation for growth, you have to have solid footing. And these four functions up here, marketing, are classic, what I've used in the past to accentuate marketing's value and to really set that solid foundation so there's no gaps. And the good thing about this strategy is it can work for a small organization as well as a large organization, and then you can throttle based on growth. So the first element here I'll talk to is business intelligence, and Chris made a good point as he was talking too about one of the first things you should do is market research, and I fully subscribe to that theory. For me here, I start asking questions in organizations I've worked for. When somebody will have a specific fact, I'll say, well, that's great. Is it what we think, or is it what we know? And the answer should be, it's what we know, because that's based on research. It's based on fundamentally what we've heard back from existing customers. It's steeped in fact. If it's what we think, well, then we probably want to validate that a little bit more. So, to institutionalize this business intelligence pillar here, you want to look at three main things. Most folks, subscribe to the theory of working across multiple industries. So you want to find out what's going on in those vertical markets or industries. Which ones are experiencing more growth than others? What's the forecast? You don't want to be looking in your rearview mirror along this journey. You really want to be looking out in front, and that's really what marketing should be doing, is scanning the horizon for opportunity. So you want to get some of that market insight and have that available to the critical decision makers at your organization on a regular basis. The second thing you want to do is you want to know your customers, and it sounds fundamental, but you'd be surprised, how many folks you might talk to in an organization and ask them to go that next level deep on some specific customers you may have or some prospects, and sometimes there's not a lot of data and information available to train people. So I'm a big advocate of knowing your customer and having resources there that let employees know, let sales, marketing, any customer-facing folks know, who the customer is, where they're located, what's their primary product, services, and solutions. And then also as important is latest information. So when you think about all the information that's available now just through secondary research and public domains, you can really find out a lot about what's going on with your customers, to Chris's point before, without making large investments. And the third area of the business intelligence piece that I talk to is competition. So, some people can be sly and say, yeah, we're kind of unique. We don't really have any competitors. But if that were true, I think everybody would be rich and going home. So, competition, it's healthy. It keeps folks focused and active. So I'm a big advocate as well as following the competition. Who are they? Why are they your competition? Getting any additional information you can have on who their customers are, maybe some price point information and such, and then bundling this up and pushing this out along with the market reports and the customer studies as well. So that's kind of completes the first business intelligence pillar here. The second one is product management, and really this is it supports the growth of the organization. We're thinking about tomorrow, we're thinking about next month, we're thinking about next year. And it's really the go-to-market strategy for what you've developed and kind of pointing the direction that you're headed. For us here, we've got some product management folks. One of the first things that we did is we put together a product management playbook. And it really was all those things that are within this domain that no matter what product or service you're supporting, we're going at it the same way, in the same direction. And that's everything from make sure you've done your homework, you've got your market research done, you've evaluated the markets that we're going into, maybe facilitated focus groups, done a SWOT analysis, some of the traditional marketing tactics. But you want to make sure you do that done. Make sure you've got all the requirements for that product or service completed. Positioning falls under this area of responsibility. So have you done the right market segmentation and analysis to position this product or service? Have you done your due diligence in terms of messaging and value proposition development, making sure you've got customer-focused language, and you've really uncovered that unique selling proposition? And then as you kind of move on and you develop this roadmap here, one of the things that I think is absolutely critical is sales and marketing alignment. And this is really where the rubber meets the road for this area of responsibility, because if those sales folks, if none of this translates, if they don't understand the true value proposition of this product or service that you're selling, it doesn't matter how good your marketing program is or how good of a sales rep is, you're not going to meet your objectives. So I think making sure that sales and marketing alignment there is critical. And then as you launch this plan here, making sure you've got your charter together, making sure that Chris had a great example of a marketing calendar that was showed up there for complete transparency about all the marketing activities that are going on. I think that's a fantastic way to showcase that. And then the last phase traditionally is evaluation. And when you look at this and you look at your product program assessment, have you really met your objectives for this? You look at this dashboard, you look at this playbook, did those products really get to where you wanted to go? And even as far as putting together a P&L, for specific services. So that's really this product management pillar. These folks that have this area of responsibility, they're primarily the subject matter experts, and those are the folks that sales can grab or we can push out to an industry trade show or an event, and they can really be that subject matter expert. The third area here, marketing communications. So if business intelligence is kind of the map of the journey, product management is kind of the parts of the car you're taking along this journey, I'd call marketing communications the engine. This is where all that great intelligence is pushed forward. We've got great go-to-market strategies. We've trained salespeople on how to do this. Now how do we promote this? This is the brand. This is how we take this to market. And for us here and for other organizations that I've worked for, there's a few key areas that this takes place. Obviously, PR, media relations, is a piece of this. Industry analyst relations would fall into this category. Trade shows and events that companies do. Web also falls into this category. So when you talk about ownership of the website, the content that's developed, search engine marketing, and then finally sales tool development. So anything that sales folks might need, everything from a proverbial PowerPoint deck to more critical assets, white papers, documentation, any other sponsored research you might have done. So that's really the engine that's going to take this forward. And then last but not least here is demand gen. So when you look at demand gen, this is really we're making those connections, driving those qualified leads. And I'm going to go into a little bit further some of the technologies that are involved in this, but the demand gen team or those inside sales folks that you may or may not have, this is where you're actually going to drive that growth. You're going to pull those leads into the organization and then build a process so that you can follow those through the sales pipeline and hopefully get those return on investments that you're looking for through all your different marketing areas.
Jeff, could you jump into a little bit the kind of team that you have and what type of team you need to get all of this done?
Yeah, absolutely, Janice. I talked about kind of some of the technologies in the process here of stabilizing this foundation for growth. And I guess it would be different for each one of these. I'll start with demand generation. Things like outbound calling activities, that's challenging. That's tough. You got to find the right kind of person for that. You got to have kind of a focus for them and really promote how important this is to the organization. And another thing that falls under demand gen for us is management of our Salesforce.com system for our CRM. And when I looked to fill that position, I wanted to find somebody who was certified, who was a certified Salesforce.com administrator who can come on and no matter what system it was, quickly get up to speed and kind of take over the management of that as well as all the support and customized reporting and all that kind of great stuff that happens under there. Another one I'll pick on is product management. I talked a little bit about the how important it is to have those subject matter experts. So, when you're looking for these people, they've got to be able to talk the talk. It's great if somebody's a quick study and they can get up to speed fast on your product portfolio. But if they really don't have that domain expertise, if they're not a known entity and somebody who is a true subject matter expert or thought leader in support of those specific products or industries that you're marketing to, you're probably going to have some challenges there. So that's a couple quick examples, if that's good, Janice.
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Next slide here, I'm going to talk a little bit about prioritization. And, if you're anything like me, the organizations you've worked for, perfect case, you'd have one or two programs that you're supporting, and you can equally distribute your efforts and your budget across them. I think for 99% of us, that is definitely not the case. When we look at programs throughout an organization, I've worked for organizations that's had 10 or 12 programs or services or products that they're selling, all the way up to dozens. And typically with marketing, most folks view it as a cost center. Sometimes it's challenging to get budget to get those marketing programs ginned up or to get those folks hired that you can see that might be able to do this job. So prioritization is a must. And what we did is looked at each and every program and actually prioritized them based on some specific criteria. And this is an exercise I led here at ATS with the leadership team, and I've done it for business units at other organizations I've worked for in the past. And there's three core areas here that you want to take a look at. So if you're evaluating a specific product or service that needs support from marketing, you want to look at the strategic fit. So is this product or service aligned with our company goals? Does this support the business drivers, the cultural commitment that you stand for? Is this something that's really going to be a strategic fit when we release it to the market or proactively market it? We want to see how market positioning is going to go. So by that I mean how crowded is the marketplace? When you look across the landscape of services, is this a me-too product or service, or is this something that's positioned very uniquely? If so, you might want to allocate some more program dollars or bodies towards marketing that. And then finally, core capabilities. So when you look at what you can do, sometimes companies can be aspirational. It's what we want to be versus what we are today. And in some cases, that's good. You have to have a vision, and you have to have focus on that vision. But do you have the core capabilities to deliver this product or service today? And you really want to rate these and make sure everyone's on the same page. When you look at the economic impact of marketing supporting some programs and initiatives, you want to look at revenue potential. And we look at that in two different ways. Revenue potential short-term and revenue potential long-term. So does this meet short-term financial objectives in terms of, say, over the next fiscal year? And the expected revenue ongoing, is this something that's going to meet our growth targets for the long term? And you want to really evaluate both of those, because you don't want to get yourself in a position where you might be supporting something for a year and then something might be amiss and revenue goes south. So you want to make sure you've got a good handle on that. You want to be able to do a cost-benefit analysis. Do we understand how many widgets we have to sell to get back our R&D dollars? Do we understand from a service perspective how long we have to deliver the service to get that ROI or to meet those key performance indicators? You really have to understand what that cost-benefit analysis is, and across the board, everybody be in alignment with that. The last one here is low cost, and this one might seem a little bit out of whack with these other ones here, but with eyeballs on budgets and a quick understanding of what's the low-hanging fruit? What's the stuff that we could sell and market today? It's got a low barrier entry in terms of cost for customers, and we know volume-wise it's something that we can probably turn over quite quickly. That could impact the short-term revenue potential and therefore how you'd prioritize a specific program or initiative. And then last here, feasibility. And when you think of any product or service or initiative you might have, evaluate the technical risk. Is this a high-risk product relative to variants of multiple technologies, technology integrations, Does that mean that pilots are going to take longer? There's more risk upon product launch. So evaluate that technical risk, because there's probably some more risky ventures than others that folks are working on. And then the last two go together. Resources, financial. So do we have the financial resources to push this forward? Is this something it's a budgeted line item? Is everybody in agreement on a leadership team or within a certain business that we're going to actually have this financial capital available to marketing to push this through and make sure that that's agreed upon? And then finally, people. When you look at resource in your resource pool, are the folks within the marketing department, sales department who can execute today? Do we have those people here, or do we have to hire them? Are there other people in the organization we could bring on for short and long-term efforts to make this a reality and to have a heightened sense of prioritization on that specific area?
So Jeff, I think this is a really high-level slide. I mean, I know there's some CEOs and CMOs who are on this call who are involved in this process. I know there's also a range of other individuals here who are looking to advance their career. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about the kind of advice you'd give to someone who's looking to step into your shoes or run a department for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say number one, whoever it is has to understand the true business challenges of what's going on within the company. Sometimes it's easy to take a cursory view and maybe suggest a path or some technologies or to go through some motions, but you really have to understand the true business challenges that's happening. Is it a branding challenge, and we really need to get the brand out there? Why aren't people buying more of this particular product, service, or solution? And I think that understanding that at the core is going to give folks that credibility and respect across the business, because you're asking those tough questions. You're asking leaders very tough questions. And sometimes those are questions they might not want to answer. But I think in order for marketing to be successful and to align both budget, program dollars, as well as bodies towards any of these efforts, I think that's key. And then after that, I just think you have to evaluate the level of sophistication that you currently have. Do you have the right people in place? Are those people that are going to be there long term? If you're planning for future growth, which I hope most folks are, do you have the right people in place? And if not, what's your 1 to 3 year plan to grow that team and to add more folks? And I think when you look at the technologies that are out there, take a look at your marketing tech stack. Do you have the right technologies in place that are going to take you to where you want to be? Again, not just for next week and next month, but long term, you want to start engaging with those partners and those technologies that also have that long-term vision.
Great. Thank you.
You bet. And then here, I'm going to go to my last slide here, which is partnering for value add. So, we talked about that journey and the roadmap and establishing those pillars of marketing. We talked about how to prioritize and how to really take focus and take the strategic vision for the company and ask those tough questions. Another piece of this is partnering for value add. And I've never worked for a company or heard of a company that didn't need to partner because they had all the in-house folks and the strategies available to them, and they can just execute every day. For a mid-market company like ATS, I'm grateful to have a fantastic marketing team across those 4 pillars. But there is cost-effective technologies and partners out there who can really make a difference. And there's a few of them here I'm just going to talk through fairly quickly. But one of them is Demand Metric. They've been around for a while. They've got about 80,000 members who are part of the Demand Metric family. I've used them for many, many years. And if you're not familiar with them, they're the ones who have a lot of practical tools and templates to get the job done. I don't know how many countless hours it saved me by just being able to search for some templates for everything from simple as a marketing budget tool to much more graphical ROI analysis and training modules. So I'd highly recommend checking them out. Another one is Vertical. They're a Chicago-based agency. Again, I've used for many, many years. Right now I'm using them in a business intelligence capacity. And if you remember back to my first slide, we talked about that business intelligence pillar. So I currently don't have any internal resources for that. I actually outsource that piece of the strategy to them and work them very closely. So routinely talking about those market research reports that we spoke about, competitive analysis, and customer information. So they really help me get down deep into those areas so that I can digest that information and then bring it back into the leadership of the organization. Chris had mentioned HubSpot as one of those marketing automation vendors, and that's another a group that we've worked with for many, many years here. And that's really our marketing automation engine for that. We use them for lead nurturing campaigns, content distribution, a lot of those typical things that you might think of from a marketing automation firm. But they're great. You know, they partner great and integrate fantastic into Salesforce.com, and we're proud to call them a partner. And then last here on the slide, I have Keyword First, and they're really focused in on search engine marketing. And again, I've used them for several years. They help manage our Google AdWords program, a lot of our paid search activities, the analysis that goes on behind the scenes, and then also some of that analytical reporting. When you get down and dirty into the conversions and the click-through rates and cost per click, cost per conversion, and on and on and on, they really help us go through those levels of detail and suggest wise ways that we can spend that part of our marketing budget. So with that, Janice, that was my last slide.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jeff. I think both your presentation and Chris were phenomenal and really provided some key insights that I can take back and use in my marketing initiatives. There's also some tools that I've used in my past marketing leadership roles to grow my team. And I'm going to go on to the next slide here. And some of my favorite tools are the ones that help me understand the individuals on my team. This slide shows a variety of personality and assessment tools, some of which I've used to better assess my own strengths, and also to get a complete picture of how my team looks. For example, I onboarded over 30 interns one summer and gave each of them a color personality assessment. I was able to figure out that they were mostly gold and blue, meaning they were organized and analytical. This helped me appropriately assign them operational tasks to get more done for marketing and for other departments as well. I also had a sales team take these color personality tests, and we found that the top 2 performers were green and red, meaning they were people-focused and action-oriented. So when you understand your team, you can figure out what gaps you have and use tools like the predictive index or Pymetrics to find the best fit for your needs. I've also found that growing your team properly requires setting up the right processes. These are a few books I've read recently that I'd recommend to marketers and business owners. Right Away and All at Once gives you 5 steps to follow to help you go from good to great, or from a sinking ship to winning the race in life and in business. Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, as well as Scaling Up, are books that provide templates you can use to set your company or organization up for success, and doing the right things over and over again to get you and your team to the next level. Finally, once you have the right team and processes in place, it's essential to offer your team the resources and training they need to grow and keep up to speed with the current markets and technologies. This is where I, like Jeff, highly recommend Demandmetrics tools, templates, and training. They have a full suite of research and resources that can help save you a tremendous amount of time and get the right things done. Just as both Jeff and Chris described earlier in their presentations, I've used Demandmetric to build out strategic marketing plans, conduct marketing research, and offer social media training modules to my team members. And Demandmetric has kindly given us their world-class marketing assessment tool. If you're an attendee of this webinar, you can download it right now on the left-hand side of your screen. I've used this assessment myself, and I found it tremendously useful in identifying priorities and strengths and specific actions to take. So if you're a solo business owner, a department head, or other type of working professional, you can use this tool to improve your marketing and optimize your effectiveness. As a special offer to attendees of this webinar, Demandmetric has offered a limited time 10% discount code to access their tools and resources. If you go to their website at demandmetric.com and click on Sign Up at the top right-hand side of the website, you will also get free tools. I know Jeff mentioned that Demandmetric has 80,000 members, and they're now at over 90,000 members and growing. I remember when I first started using their services a few years ago, they were at around 30,000 members. So I know this is definitely something people are using and they're finding really beneficial. And you can see that there are different levels. You'll get 10% off any of Demandmetric's levels. They range from downloading 5 templates a month all the way up to getting access to their advisory services, which I've used myself as well. And they give you unlimited downloads of their templates and training for your team. So it's really a highly recommended resource. And we're pretty lucky to get this 10% off for our webinar attendees. And the code you would enter after you take step 2 in your signing up process at demandmetric.com, You'd enter a coupon code, and that coupon code is simply JANICE, Janice. At this point, we're going to open up the floor for additional Q&A, and feel free to reach out to any of us. We have all of our bios for you to download and our LinkedIn profiles for you to connect with us on the left-hand side of your screen. Now let's take a look at the questions coming in now, and feel free to keep adding them to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Here's one question for Jeff. How do you keep everyone on the same page when you're working on messaging and building out elements such as value propositions?
Yeah, that's a great question, Janice. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. What works best for me is putting together a workshop for those key stakeholders in the beginning, because typically you're going to be working with folks across the organization. There's probably sales folks, operations folks,